Howdy, my name is Kay Britton, and I am a multidisciplinary artist. I am beginning a new body of work that involves a little bit of research. So, today I'm going to be rambling about the first piece of media I have read in preparation for this new body of work, which is called Michelle Remembers by Michelle Smith and Dr. Lawrence Pazder. This is a book that started the whole Satanic Panic of the 1980s. It recounts Michelle Smith's repressed memories that were uncovered with her therapist, Dr. Lawrence Pazder, as she recounts memories 20 years after the events of the book. She claims that as a child, her mother placed her in a satanic cult, and the book essentially is the retelling of an 80-day ritual that she was a part of as she faced abuse in this satanic cult. This book has been debunked after the fact, and it is not a true account. But nevertheless, at the time that it was published, Michelle Smith and Dr. Lawrence Pazder received tons of notoriety and money from the sale of this book, and unfortunately set off the beginning stages and the events of what's called the Satanic Panic of the 1980s. Essentially, what happened during the Satanic Panic was that suddenly a hysteria comes over Canada and the United States. This was in Canada that this took place. And basically, police began to be trained on child ritual abuse and satanic ritual abuse. And one of the other famous cases that happened during the Satanic Panic is the McMartin School trial, which essentially claimed that this family that was running this preschool, I believe, was a part of a satanic cult and was was abusing the children, the students at the school. Famously, I don't know if that's still the case, but at the time it happened, it was, I think, Los Angeles County, their most expensive case trial that had ever happened. It happened over the course of like 5 or 6 years, I think. It might have been 7. It was so expensive over that course of time, and then no one got charged at the end of it. No one was charged. Really bonkers to kind of do a deep dive into what happened during the Satanic Panic. But anyway, Michelle Remembers is the book that started the whole Satanic Panic. This was the beginning of the whole thing. The book is the retelling of Michelle's part of being a satanic cult at the hands of her mother. Her mother placed her in this satanic cult. I don't know exactly what page it was on, but some of the things that basically debunked it. On one of the pages, she claims to not have any siblings, but in reality, she actually has two sisters. She makes a claim about being in an accident, in a car accident, at the beginning of the book, and so she has to go to the hospital for this car accident, and like this is one of the first times that the cult is like introduced in her life from her mother. Um, One of the other things that debunked it was apparently because of that car crash, she claimed their local newspaper used to report every single car crash that happened in the area, but did not record any instance where she was involved in a car crash, or the location of the crash that she claimed she was in. And then basically from the notoriety of this book, Michelle Smith and Dr. Lawrence Pazder began like sitting on panels and being interviewed. At one point, Michelle Smith was on the Oprah show. So they're getting all this notoriety from this account. They even were like involved with. They were even involved with the Pope. Like went to the Pope basically to like tell their story. And I think there was a case, or there's a point where like her mother passed away, and someone interviewed her father about this book, and during this book, Michelle and Dr. Pazder are both married to other people, but they were not public about the fact that after this was published, they both divorced their spouses and married each other. So there was an interview with Michelle Smith's father, and he basically like outed this information and was like, yeah, they haven't been very upfront about that information, which I thought was really interesting. And then there's a couple other things that kind of debunked this story, but what I'm kind of interested in for this new body of work is like this idea of hysteria and how it comes over a large group of people, and how people get roped into something much bigger than themselves and maybe don't realize the implications or the harm that they're doing when we make these grandiose false claims about a group of people. And so, of course, like the history, of course, like propaganda during World War II against Jewish people, Satanic Panic, and then currently, like how all of these things kind of are related to modern witch hunts, especially related to queer and trans people, and how a lot of times there's just these big blanket statements and things created out of thin air about marginalized communities to basically make them look like other and not like me, and to basically paint out a group of people as vile, disgusting, like, demons, basically, without actually looking at the evidence of, like, obviously these things are not true, but they just get, like, blanket statement and blanket believed by hundreds of thousands of people, and then all of a sudden it becomes true when it's obviously not. And I think that's very relatable to current events, current policies, and then also, like, social media and lack of fact checking, so to speak. So I'm really interested in all of that and how that all kind of ties together with modern witch hunts for queer people. So, anyway, I'll get more into the book. This is a 334-page book about Michelle's retelling of her time during her time in a satanic cult where she was abused and used as a part of this ritual. And I believe the account is like of an 80-day ritual. I think I read somewhere. They don't give you like a specific timeline in the book, but I believe it's an 80-day ritual that Michelle was forced to be a part of, basically to bring, like, Satan to Earth. Pretty bonkers claim here, but after reading, I did understand why at the time this was published, why people would believe it. There's such vivid descriptions of, costumes and setting, like in the room where these rituals would occur, how Michelle would respond to these cult members, that were putting her through these rituals against her will, graveyards, like things like that. And some of it is very heartbreaking. There's a lot of trigger warnings to put in this book for cults, SA, abuse, harming animals, harming humans, obviously, witchcraft. There's everything. Very, very trigger worthy book, but there's such vivid details that I understand why people thought this was real. But then also, obviously, knowing this is debunked and reading this 40 years after it was published, maybe 45 years after it was published, I also can see that some of the details are so specific, incredibly specific. And she's recounting these events as like a 28-year-old, so 20 years after this happened. And in my brain, of course, I just can't see how 20 years after these events supposedly happened, how you would remember such vivid detail of these events. And then also, basically, the story goes that her, through hypnosis and tape recordings, Dr. Lawrence Pazder was able to help her recount, like to bring out these repressed memories of this event. She was seeing him for, as a therapist, for a whole different reason. And all of a sudden, Michelle starts recounting these events. And so they, for 2 years, begin hypnosis and using a tape recorder to allow Michelle to recount these events and basically to dive back in to her past and, like, as a child, to recount the events of the book. The length of time makes sense. Obviously, there's certain things that, like, are just a little weird coincidences. Like, for instance, in the book, ASMR. In the book, this has pictures in it. They claim that, like, Michelle has these rashes on her face and body that happen, like, when she is recounting these events. So for instance, there is, this one. On her neck. And they claim, this is towards the end of the ritual, they claim that it is in the shape of the spade at the end of Satan's tail wrapped around her neck, and that is appearing on her body 20 years after Satan wrapped his tail around her neck. So there's certain things with, like, the rashes, again, that would offer some physical, physical evidence of this actually happening. But also, to me, I can't help but say that, like, this looks like a seatbelt rash. You know what I mean? Like, when someone gets in a car accident and they get that line from a seatbelt, like, on their neck, if they, like, jut forward, obviously I can't say that's the case or not, but they claim certain things, evidence-wise, that could obviously be explained by something else. And they have total confirmation bias of their evidence. Another thing that they claim that seems a little suspicious to me, like what I mentioned earlier, is that some of the details that Michelle claims is just, it's so specific. And it seems a little unlikely that you would remember such detail 20 years after this happened. So, for instance, the last, I think, like 50 or maybe 100 pages is basically the part of this ritual that Michelle plays a role in, where Satan is physically in the room with them. And the way that Satan speaks is in, like, rhythm and rhymes. So there are pages and pages and pages of Satan's rhymes as she's recounting this in her story, that have, like, double and triple meanings and things like that, which is, I mean, very interesting to read. But there are, like, every other page is half a page of rhymes. And again, to me, it seems a little bonkers to believe that 20 years after the events of this book, or after when she's recounting this, that she would remember every single line of poetry that Satan is spitting. Okay, so, and again, pages and pages and pages of these. So, for instance, one of them is, out of dark and fire red comes a man of living dead. I only walk the earth at night. I only burn out the light. I go where everybody's afraid. I go and find the ones who've strayed. All the darkest forces, they are mine. The darkest forces all entwine. Come my power, come my strength. Fire, fire, burn and burn. Forces of darkness, turn, turn. Turn around all the light. Turn a light, make it night. Come my evil friends alike. Turn the light. Burn, burn, burn. I think I can see why people believed this when it came out because of such vivid details. But if you're looking at it logically, it just is bonkers that people could so easily not think about their bias. You know, if you're a Christian or you're a Catholic, of course, like, of course you're going to believe something like this. But if you're thinking about it logically, why would you be able to remember that exact poem? You know what I mean? It's bonkers. Some of the details, I mean, she's recounting details of, like, the costumes and the very specific rituals that the that the cult members were wearing, the props that they had, these, different colored candles and twigs, and they lit this fire in the left of the room and then to the right, and then there's a statue and this, that, and the other. There's very vivid detail about the events of the multiple rituals that she was a part of. But having read it, obviously knowing that this is debunked, it reads to me almost like not a fantasy book, but like if you were writing a story about a satanic cult. And it's very interesting, I will say, from that standpoint. It is interesting because it reads like a fantasy book. It's so specific, it has to be, something like someone is authoring rather than claiming it is the true account of something. So, I mean, they have diagrams of the ritual, how things occurred during the ritual. It's very specific, which would confirm for other people outside of the situation that this is a true event. I'm very glad I read it, and I would encourage other people to read it because it is a good read, again, from a from a fantasy standpoint. It's a really good book. It's really interesting, but from a memoir perspective, it is bonkers. So, but to know that this set off the events of the Satanic Panic, you can see why it is easy for people to believe false statements when you have a 300-page book like claiming this wild event from a personal standpoint 20 years in the past, because how can you deny something 20 years in the past, but logically it doesn't make any sense that you would remember so much detail about every single day for this like 80-day ritual. How would you remember that much detail, in my opinion? Not saying that things like that don't happen, because I'm sure there's people who have very sharp memories, but it is just interesting looking back on it, knowing that this has been debunked. So, anyway, if you are interested in the Satanic Panic, I would definitely recommend this book. It is actually a good book on its own, just not as a true memoir. Other pieces of media that I would recommend, if you're interested in these topics, there is a great documentary about this and going through how it was debunked. And if you have a library card, you can access it through the app Canopy, and it is called Satan Wants You. It's a documentary. It's really good. They kind of do a little bit more of a deep dive into like the excuse me. They do a deeper dive into the notoriety that Michelle and Lawrence received after this book was published. I actually should read it again, or I should watch it again, excuse me. It was very interesting. I also just watched a movie. I can't remember what it's called, but there was a movie with like James Woods in it called something like the McMartin Trial or something. And it recounts the events of the McMartin school trial and the legal case of the trial. Also very interesting. There is another book I want to read, I think, called Satanic Panic Pop Culture something, and it's by Kier Janice, I think. So I want to read that, or I want to check that out. So yeah, there's a couple more pieces of media like surrounding this. It's a very interesting topic. So if anyone has other pieces of media, books, like music, film, documentary, etc., that is related to this topic that I should check out, please let me know. I'm taking all suggestions. And as it relates to like hysteria and false claims against marginalized groups of people, that's like really what this new body of art is going to be about. Don't know if I have anything else to say. Oh, I have been listening to a lot of music related to this. So Diamanda Galas, beautiful, very heavy music that is kind of dark and scary sometimes, that is really about her recounting, like her music is very influenced by the loss of so many people during the AIDS epidemic and the horror of seeing all of your loved ones pass away very tragically, and trying, the horror of speaking up about this event and no one cared because it was the queer community. No one, gave a shit. So Diamanda Galas is definitely like totally influenced this body of work. And then also I've been listening to a ton of other musicians, but Reverend Kristen Michael Hayter / Lingua Ignota. But both projects have really been speaking to me as I delve into this research project. So, anyway, if anyone has recommendations for things like that, media like that, please let me know, because I am taking all suggestions as I begin this research project. So, Michelle remembers. Interesting book. Not true, but very interesting. And I would recommend it. It's a very interesting read. So, thanks for listening to me ramble. I figured as other social media is kind of a little wonky right now, I feel like now's a good time maybe to return to like long form video and just trying to ramble about things that I like and document certain things related to this new body of work. So, thanks for listening to me ramble, and hopefully I will have something else to ramble about very soon. So, ta-ta, bye-bye.